Hello and welcome back to the bar. This is Business Authority Radio. I'm Neil Howe, and together again here with Craig Williams. We talked about being able to pivot in the last show, and we touched on that. We want to talk about that today because it's one of those words that we're hearing now more and more. Companies really have to pivot. They have to find a different way of doing things, and it's not just business. You're looking at other things like schools as well that have had to pivot, and churches that have to do things online. So, that's what we really want to talk about today. Craig, what do you got to say about pivoting right now? You're the master of the pivot.
I actually knew of one acronym for pivot, and that's prostate intervention versus observation trial. I don't know if that's
that's too confusing for me.
I don't know if that's the one we're talking about, but it can be a pain in the butt. Pivoting for some. I look at pivoting as adapting to change, and as an entrepreneur, that's what truly makes an entrepreneur outside of them taking on the full risk of a venture. But being able to change, and that means that you have to build a foundation of value to really adapt as quick as change is coming now. Technology changes real quick. Iterations can be daily or weekly, but the way that things have been lately, it's been somewhat of a technology iterative change when we were waiting on the news to tell us when we could go back to this type of congregation or engaging with others. And you almost have to wait for the news to see how you're going to operate, or that memo or email or text from your job or your vocation to tell you how we're working this week. So I mean, we're all, I think it's exciting that we're all being able to tap into that ability and the capacity that we all have. We just haven't had to for the most part. But entrepreneurs constantly pivot. Those who are interested in sustaining, being able to adapt. And like I said, if you have a lot of value, you're just basically tweaking the value that you offer, that deliverable to your customer, your client, that supply chain. If you have something that everybody wants, sometimes you just have to figure out, are we going to distribute it weekly as opposed to quarterly, So those are the types of things we have to be open for in this time. And that's why pivoting is such a trending word now for not just for us, but for everybody.
Well, let's talk about the churches and the schools first, because they've really had to pivot and do things differently. But thankfully, for some technology, they have been able to do that. What do you think the impact of that is going to be going forward for them?
I think there's that positive. I look at things as half full. I think in this time, whether it was churches or schools, the mundane, especially for students, whether it be an elementary or a college, the mundane things that we take for granted about human touch and engagement. I think people are appreciating what we're really about as human beings. The future is going to bring an anticipation for us to gather and appreciate each other a lot better. I think for places like churches, people won't be as concerned about what they have on, but as they are as just seeing and exchanging with those people outside of their immediate family. So that's one of the things that I look at. I happen to be used to be a part of a very large church, and at one time, and I remember one of the technologies. I'm not going to name the name, but I will name the technology. It was called Streaming Faith, and you could look up the founder, and it's pretty interesting that over 20, 30 years ago, who would have thought that how important, because I know it was very difficult for them to share with the church or the religious organizations about how it would be good to be able to stream your message to those, and probably the pitch was those who were sick and shut in. And now it's the platform that everything's built on, from Zoom to everything else, as far as congregating around one message and getting it out live, or getting it out at the times that we were used to being in service. So yeah, I think that human interaction, I think that's something that we're all looking forward to, and we all should look at not so much as an opportunity to catch up on something, but just appropriate and not take for granted that interaction that we do have with each other. And that's really where we're energized, being around each other.
Yeah, let's switch gears to business now and talk about businesses, because businesses that have a strong culture and systems in place are going to be able to take that culture and systems, and they're going to be able to pivot because they have a certain understanding, they have a certain mindset of the people at the company, and then they have certain systems that can do different things. You look at companies like 3M that, switched from what they were doing to making face masks. And because they have that system and culture in place, they're able to do that. One of the other major companies that was born out of the Great Depression was General Motors, that you worked with, years and years ago. And tell me about some of the culture and systems that are in place, there, that can help, people, or help those companies really pivot a little bit faster.
Well, I mean, the culture of productivity or production, I think with General Motors, that was something that we had model change, or it was, we were able to refit for a change or pivot as we're talking about now, as far as what we're building. A lot of these companies like 3M, even Legos. I've heard that Legos started making some PPE. They adapted some of their, the toys, because of that. I think 3D technology, they're able to, start helping put out some of the PPE that the first responders need. So having a culture of production and productivity, I think we all, if you're in business, you better have even if it's a service or product, there is a line of production that you have, and that's from the time you get the order to the time of delivery. I think that mindset of production is going to be even more refined now. I mean, because we don't have the travel to and from work, the dead time that we would have at work. I think a lot of people are seeing that, hey, I'm working just as much at home as I was at work, whereas the culture sometimes may have been more of a social one than productivity. I think production is going to be at the forefront of a lot of our businesses, and we'll be social about productivity. I mean, because a lot of things are measured by what the deliverable is now, as opposed to, I saw you in the office, so I might have thought you were working, but since I don't see you in the office, I'm putting out this request and I'm waiting for that deliverable to come. So productivity, I think, is going to be heightened for all businesses across the board.
Mm. And we talk about the businesses that don't have that system and aren't able to pivot. I was just reading that Neiman Marcus is, one of those companies that, big brand name that is, possibly filing for bankruptcy because, without the customer, what can they do? If they're set in their ways and they don't know how to pivot, they go bankrupt. I've been talking to a lot of bankruptcy attorneys recently, and they're having talks with their clients, and they say that they're going to be busy for the next 10 years after this.
Yeah, that retail piece was already hurting before this. Retail was looking for, how can we pull people into the stores when we're competing with the likes of Amazon, who could bring the store to the home. And a lot of what you used to experience in retail was the experience of going to the store, how you were treated. The space that I am really excited about is that merging service and hospitality together. The likes of Neiman's and the Macy's and the mall, those stores those are the anchor stores of the malls. And that old model of waiting for somebody to come get what you have, as opposed to being able to extend it outside of those four walls, that's, I mean, you hit it right on the head. There is going to be a lot more of that. And these are brands that have been around for, decades, and they're having to figure out what, a lot of the retail businesses that are thriving now are those who started online and what they scaled based upon what they were able to deliver or produce. And then they built a brick and mortar and then went into those spaces of a retail space so that they can create an experience around that. And the likes of a Neiman Marcus or the Macy's, they were just the opposite. That was the old traditional way of doing business. Build it so they'll come. Well, people aren't coming, don't feel they have to, thanks to the likes of Amazon. And those who have built the infrastructure, the Ubers of the world, the Lyfts of the world, basically those are logistics companies that have been transporting things that we're familiar with, but they also have now built an infrastructure that they could deliver anything to the consumer now, and more efficient. And we being in an on-demand society, that's very important now, especially for our time. And even now, it's more so now. I mean, if I wanted something from Neiman's and stores like that, they had a high price point, and it was about that experience that they had when they came into the store. And if I don't get outside of the house, I forget about that experience. It's not a necessity, right?
Yeah, that's it. Well, what's for sure is that the world is always changing, and with technology, the way that technology is just getting faster and faster, the world is changing faster and faster as well. It's exponentially changing. So, even looking at companies that were, the top 10 companies back in, 2000 to 2010 were your energy companies, your ExxonMobils, the big Procter and Gamble, those kinds of companies, and now they've been taken over by your Apples, your Googles, your Facebooks. So and that's just in the space of 10 to 15 years. What's it going to be like as we go faster, like I said, in change? What's it going to be like in the next 5 to 10 years, with all these other companies that are up and coming now? So lots to think about there. There's a whole conversation based on that, but just wanted to get that pivot word. It's such a popular word right now, is pivot. Yeah. So I thought we should talk about that. So another thing that we want to talk about as well is certainty, and certainty is something that people will need to have in their lives, and everything is uncertain right now. So that will be the topic for the next conversation on the bar. Thank you for joining us on Business Authority Radio, and we will see you next time.